When it comes to rods, I prefer a 6-weight, because the wind can blow quite hard in the mountains.
You can say that again.
In calmer and quieter conditions, a 5-weight would have been sufficient. When we started to use the new types of lines and so on, you went up a class, from a weight-forward 7 line on a 6-weight rod, for example. But now most rods are classed by the line weight. So the rod's 6-weight, and the line's a weight-forward 6. If you buy an old rod of an unusual make, you should find out what weight it is from the seller. When it's very windy, I prefer a rod that's a little heavier, so I get where I want to. What about you?
I use a 5-weight, my absolute favorite. It's all about making a good presentation of the flies. I think it suits most waters, but you can use a 6-weight or a 7-weight on open waters where the wind is strong. And then there's another aspect to the choice of rod. You need to have a weight of rod that allows you to hook and play the fish within a reasonable time. To stand there with, say, a 2-weight rod, not that I'm recommending a 2-weight rod for rapid mountain waters where the fish are in the kilo class or above, and have to play a fish for 30 minutes or more, isn't good for the fish or anything else.
When I go to the mountain rivers, I always take 2 rods with me, in 3 or 4 sections, and 2 reels.
I'm glad you mentioned the multi-piece rods. Rods were usually in 1 piece, and then came the 2-piece rod. Today rods come in 3, 4, 5 or 6 pieces, but a 3 or 4-piece rod is suitable. It's simple to pack, easy to carry in a helicopter, which you might want to use in the mountains. It fits into a backpack so you don't get tangled up in the birch forests, and that's happened to me a few times when I've used a 2-piece rod. A 3 or 4-piece rod is best.
What about the reel?
You should have, well, I like large arbor reels. It gives you a good speed when you wind in or when the fish rushes away. Fast in, fast out. They're much smoother to use when playing the fish than the older models.
Or when you've hooked a fish and need to retrieve some line. A large arbor reel is much better.
I agree.
What about maintenance? It looks easy enough.
They are very easy to maintain. Reels have become much simpler, and not much can go wrong for the users. But don't attempt to do anything to the braking system. You need a rocket scientist for that.
No, we Earlier reels didn't have brakes. There was an inbuilt inertia in them, and the only brake was your thumb. We still do that.
But the braking systems are fantastic now.
So much for rods and reels. What about lines?
I fish with a floating weight-forward line for 80 to 90% of the time. Previously, we used a double-tapered line. You could turn it, and it let you get double the life out of the line. A lot's happened since then, and we look at equipment in a different way. We spend more money on it. and a weight-forward line today is at least as good as a double-tapered when it comes to presentation. You can cast it further and control it better. Casting techniques have improved. We used under- and overhand casts, and we almost always shoot out the line while still retaining good presentation. A floating weight-forward line is the first step.
So weight forward is the way to go.
Yes, but I usually have sinking lines with me as well. I use very simple lines, grain lines, but not 600 to 800 grain sea trout or salmon line. I use 150 to 200 grain lines so that I get into the really deep holes where I can tempt the fish with a zonker or a woolly bugger or similar flies.
I'm joined at the wrist with a 6-weight rod and a dry fly, and I usually say, in jest, that I'm not interested in a fish that won't take a dry fly. You get there in the end.
There's a lot of truth in that. If you found a mountain river with deep holes, perhaps 4 or 5 meters deep, and you want to get to the bottom to tempt a trout, then probably that trout isn't very active. He'll come up to shallower water to hunt when he's active. When he changes a position, he might take a floating line or a line with a sinking leader.
I've started using a system which lets me add a sinking leader to my line. And I think it works okay. But what about leaders? What do you have to say about them?
I normally use monofilament leaders. Fluorocarbon materials were introduced some years ago. They're less visible underwater and retain their strength even over time, and they don't dry out. A real improvement. A tapered monofilament leader is simple. You get a good presentation, it rolls out well and smoothly. It's economical in comparison with other leader systems, even if I change leaders quite often. And furthest out, I use a tippet. I use it both for sinking and floating lines.
You have to add tippet to the leader now and then, because when you change fly, it gets shorter and shorter.
I usually use tippet in 3 sizes, 3X, 5X, and 6X.
Okay, I use 3, 4, 5 and 6X. But if you look back 25 years, there wasn't a variety of sizes for leaders, and even further back, I remember when 3X came and we thought it was very thin. An earlier classic was 2X and up to 1X. So it's just amazing, and they've got stronger and stronger.
That's true. From the fishing point of view, you shouldn't fish with a thinner leader than the situation demands. I use 5X to 3X for streamers and 5X for normal nymph fishing, as well as for dry fly fishing, usually grayling and trout. I can manage a lot on 5X. I use 6X when fishing with very small mayflies and midges.
If you're using size 16 or 18 hooks, the very small ones, then a 5X lead is too thick and it's difficult to get a good presentation.
You need to have as thick a leader as possible so you can land the fish as quickly as possible without doing it harm.
We're talking about modern fly fishing, great reels and rods, a huge selection of lines, strong but thin leaders, and when you've got a fish on the hook, we come to the forceps.
Forceps. There's a whole host of models. I think it's the most important tool we have after the rod itself.
Here's another style, straight. It was really a surgical instrument from the beginning.
We use it to remove hooks, and it's better to damage the fly rather than the fish when using forceps. That must be rule number 1.
These haven't been around for so many years in the fishing world.
But it's a fantastic instrument.
So to sum up, the winds of change have always blown through the world of fishing. New materials, new tools, tools in new materials, everything getting lighter and lighter. But one thing I miss in our range of modern equipment is the traditional fishing creel. All those amazing people, Rolf Smedman, Hans Lidman, Bengt Öster, and the others, they always had a basket. It was meant to be used for putting your fish in. Well, nothing wrong with that. I used one, and I've worn out a few. I think I stopped about 10 years ago. But I used to keep the camera in it. And finally, what should everyone take with them to the mountains?
A good knife. There are other tools in the fly fisherman's kit. I see you got some line clippers there. That's okay, but when I'm in the mountains, I never use them. I've got them somewhere, but I've always got my knife in my belt.
It's a universal tool.
It's a tool used for food, for wood cutting, line cutting, and for gutting fish if you catch a fish to eat. It's very important.
And the knife showed that you were a man.
Exactly.
When I was 7, I was given a knife and learned how to catch brown trout. And then I was a real man, wasn't I? I remember my grandfather had cleaned a fish by the lake and then rinsed his knife. Then he went up the bank to get his sandwiches and used the same knife for the butter. It's always been like that. Always. But I get comments about it. But this is how things are. You've only got one knife on you, and you use it for everything.
Of course, you use it for everything. You carve your dried reindeer meat with it.
Okay. Time to move on?
A new day with new opportunities.
Shall we get the boat out, try our luck?
Let's do that.
And there's a fine west wind.
Lovely.